Catherine sat in her car with both hands gripping the steering wheel. She'd been sitting there for 20 minutes now, staring at the brick building in front of her. The funeral home looked peaceful from the outside, with its neat flower beds and soft lighting coming through the windows. But inside that building was a gathering she never thought she'd attend. The man who killed her brother was being mourned in there. She turned off the engine again. This was the third time. Start the car, turn it off. Start it again, turn it off. Her heart was racing like she'd just run a marathon. What was she even doing here? Her family would be furious if they knew. Actually, furious wasn't strong enough. They'd feel betrayed. 15 years. It had been 15 years since that awful night when 2 police officers knocked on their door. Catherine still remembered every detail. The way her mother's coffee mug slipped from her hands and shattered on the kitchen floor. The sound her father made, like all the air had been knocked out of his lungs. Her own scream that didn't sound like it came from her at all. Her little brother Danny was gone. Just like that. 22 years old. His whole life ahead of him and gone because someone decided to get behind the wheel drunk. Thomas Miller. That was the man's name. Catherine had heard it so many times during the trial that it felt burned into her brain. Thomas Miller, 47 years old at the time, architect, married with 2 kids. Thomas Miller, who went to a work party, had too much to drink and drove home anyway. Thomas Miller, who ran a red light and crashed into Danny's car at 60 miles per hour. The trial had lasted 3 months. Catherine's family sat through every single day of it, watching Thomas Miller sit at the defense table in his suit and tie. His wife sat behind him, always in dark colors, her face pale and drawn. Their kids never came to the courthouse. Catherine was glad about that. She didn't want to see them. Didn't want to think of Thomas Miller as someone's father. It was easier to hate him when he was just a monster. He got 12 years. With good behavior, he was out in 8. 8 years for a life. That's what her father always said. 8 years for my son's life. Where's the justice in that? When Thomas got out of prison, there was a lot of talk in their small town. Some people thought he'd paid his debt. Others, like Catherine's family, felt like no amount of time could ever be enough. The 2 families never spoke. They couldn't, really. What would they even say? The Millers moved to a different part of town. Catherine heard things occasionally through the grapevine. Thomas was working as a counselor or something. His wife had taken a job at the library. Their kids went to the high school across town. That's all Catherine knew, and it was more than she wanted to know. Then last week she saw the obituary in the paper. Thomas Miller, dead at 62 from liver disease. The funeral would be held at Riverside Funeral Home, services at 2 in the afternoon. Catherine had stared at that obituary for a long time. She didn't feel happy about it. She thought she would, honestly. For years she'd imagined hearing about his death and feeling relieved, like maybe that would bring some kind of closure. But instead she just felt empty. And then, for reasons she still couldn't explain, she decided to come here. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Claire. Want to come over for dinner tonight? Making lasagna. Catherine didn't respond. If Claire knew where she was right now, there'd be no lasagna invitation. There'd probably be no sister anymore. The Chen family didn't forgive Thomas Miller. That was the unspoken rule. At family gatherings, if anyone even accidentally mentioned his name, the temperature in the room dropped. Her father would get this look on his face like stone. Her mother would leave the room. Claire would change the subject quickly, shooting warning looks at whoever had made the mistake. They kept Danny's memory alive in other ways. His room was exactly as he'd left it. His favorite coffee mug was still in the kitchen cabinet. Every year on his birthday, they went to his favorite restaurant and ordered his usual meal. They talked about him, told stories, laughed at his jokes. But they never ever talked about moving forward. They never talked about letting go. Catherine looked at herself in the rearview mirror. She was 42 now but felt older. The last 15 years had been hard. She'd thrown herself into her work as a teacher, finding purpose in helping kids. But at night, alone in her apartment, the anger would creep back in. The unfairness of it all. The way one person's terrible decision had destroyed so many lives. She'd been in therapy off and on. Her therapist, Dr. Rodriguez, had gently suggested one time that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Catherine had gotten defensive. So I'm just supposed to forgive him? Pretend it never happened? Forgiveness isn't about him, Dr. Rodriguez had said. It's about you. It's about not letting what happened continue to hurt you every single day. Catherine hadn't gone back after that session. She wasn't ready to hear it. But now, sitting in this parking lot, those words came back to her. Was she drinking poison? Had she been poisoning herself for 15 years? Through the funeral home window, she could see people moving around inside. A woman in a black dress stood greeting visitors. That must be his wife, Beverly. Catherine had only seen her during the trial, always from across a courtroom. She looked older now, worn down by life. Catherine wondered what Beverly's life had been like. Did people in town treat her differently? Did she lose friends? Did her kids get bullied at school because of what their father did? She shook her head. Why was she thinking about them? They weren't the victims here. Danny was the victim. Her family was the victims, but something was pulling her toward that building anyway. Some voice in her head, quiet but persistent, saying she needed to be here. She needed to see this. She needed to understand something she couldn't quite name yet. Catherine took a deep breath and checked her appearance in the mirror one more time. She looked tired. The gray in her hair was more noticeable now. When did that happen? When did she get so old? She thought about Danny. What would he say if he could see her right now? Danny, who was always the peacemaker in the family. Danny, who gave homeless people money even when he barely had any himself. Danny, who believed the best in everyone, sometimes to a fault. Would Danny want her to be here? Or would he want her to keep hating the man who killed him? She'd never know the answer to that. And that was perhaps the cruelest part of it all. Catherine opened the car door. The evening air was cool and she could smell rain coming. She stood there for a moment, one hand still on the door, giving herself one last chance to change her mind. Then she closed the door, locked the car, and started walking toward the funeral home. Her legs felt shaky, like they might give out at any moment. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She had no idea what she was going to do once she got inside. She hadn't planned this. She didn't know what to say if anyone recognized her, but she kept walking anyway. The front door of the funeral home was heavy, and when she pulled it open, the smell hit her immediately. Flowers and something else. Some kind of air freshener trying to mask the heaviness of grief. Soft music played from somewhere. Classical piano, the kind that's supposed to be comforting. Inside, about 30 people stood in small groups talking quietly. Some were crying. Others looked uncomfortable, the way people do at funerals when they don't know what to say, and there, at the front of the room, was the casket. Catherine stayed near the back wall, trying to blend into the shadows. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in faces she didn't recognize. Work colleagues, probably. Maybe neighbors. People whose lives Thomas Miller had touched in ways that didn't involve destroying a family. She spotted Beverly Miller immediately. It was impossible not to. She stood near the entrance, shaking hands and accepting condolences with a tired grace that made Catherine's chest tighten. Beverly looked so much older than Catherine remembered. Her hair was completely gray now, pulled back in a simple bun. She wore a plain black dress that hung loose on her frame, like she'd lost weight recently, probably from taking care of a dying husband. Catherine felt a strange pang of something. Not sympathy exactly. She wasn't ready for that. But maybe recognition. The recognition of another person who'd been through something hard. She shouldn't have come. This was a mistake. Catherine started to edge back toward the door, moving carefully so she wouldn't draw attention to herself. But then Beverly looked up, and their eyes met across the room. The moment stretched out forever. Beverly's face went pale. Her hand, which had been reaching out to greet another mourner, froze in midair. Catherine couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The entire room seemed to fade away until there was just the two of them, staring at each other across 15 years of pain and silence. Beverly whispered something to the person next to her and started walking toward Catherine. Actually walking toward her. Through the crowd, past the flower arrangements with slow, deliberate steps, Catherine's first instinct was to run. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to get out, to leave before this became real. But her feet wouldn't move. She stood there frozen as Beverly Miller approached. They stood face to face. Beverly's eyes were red and swollen from crying. Up close, Catherine could see the fine lines around her mouth, the age spots on her hands, the exhaustion that seemed to radiate from every part of her. "You came," Beverly whispered. Her voice cracked on the words. Catherine nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. "I never thought Beverly stopped, swallowed hard. Could we talk? Just for a minute? Every reasonable part of Catherine's brain said no. Said to leave right now, to not let this go any further. But that strange pull that had brought her here in the first place made her nod again. Beverly led her to a small room off to the side, away from the other mourners. It was quieter here, with just a few chairs and a table with a box of tissues. Beverly closed the door gently behind them. They stood there for a moment, not knowing where to start. Catherine had imagined confronting Thomas Miller's family 1,000 times over the years. In her mind, she'd had speeches prepared, things she'd say about justice and pain and how they'd destroyed her family. But now, standing here with this tired, grieving woman, all those words disappeared. "I don't know why I came," Catherine finally said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "I'm glad you did." Beverly's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I've wanted to reach out to your family so many times over the years. But I never knew how. What could I possibly say that would matter?" Catherine didn't respond. She didn't have an answer to that. Beverly reached into her purse with shaking hands. She pulled out an envelope, worn at the edges like it had been handled many times. "Thomas wrote this. About 6 months ago when he got really sick. He asked me to give it to your family, but he also said he'd understand if I didn't. He said he didn't deserve to ask for anything from any of you." Catherine stared at the envelope like it might bite her. Her name was written on the front in shaky handwriting. "Catherine Chen. I don't want it," she said automatically. "I know," Beverly said quietly. "But maybe you need it anyway." Catherine's hand trembled as she reached out and took the envelope. It felt heavy, heavier than paper should feel, like it was weighted with all the things that had been left unsaid for 15 years. "He never forgave himself," Beverly said. "Not for one single day. People think prison was his punishment, but the real punishment was living with what he'd done. Every morning he'd wake up and remember. Every night he'd go to bed thinking about your brother, about your family." "Good," Catherine said, and immediately felt terrible for saying it. But it was honest. Part of her did want him to have suffered. Beverly nodded, not looking offended. "I get it. I'd probably feel the same way if I were you." She sat down heavily in one of the chairs. "Do you want to know what happened to us?" "After?" Catherine wasn't sure she did, but she sat down anyway. "The town turned on us," Beverly said.
"Not everyone, but enough."
"People who'd been our friends for years stopped calling. Parents didn't want their kids playing with ours. I lost my job. Had to find work in the next town over. Our kids," she paused, her voice breaking. "Our kids got bullied terribly. Called murderers children. They didn't understand. They were just babies when it happened." Catherine felt that uncomfortable feeling again. She'd never thought about Thomas Miller's children. Never wanted to. Our daughter, Melissa, she's 29 now. She's a social worker. Works with at-risk youth. Our son, Christopher, he's 26. He's a teacher." Beverly smiled sadly. "They both spent their lives trying to make up for something they didn't do. Trying to prove they weren't like their father." "What did he do?" Catherine asked. "After prison, I mean. He became a substance abuse counselor. Worked at a treatment center. He wanted to stop other people from making the same mistake he did." Beverly pulled a tissue from the box. "He helped a lot of people. Got letters from families thanking him for saving their kids, their husbands, their wives. But it never felt like enough to him. He'd say, 'I saved 10 people, but I killed one.' The math doesn't work out." Catherine felt tears starting in her own eyes. She didn't want to cry here. Didn't want to feel anything except the anger she'd been holding on to for so long. "Read the letter," Beverly said softly. "You don't have to read it now. Take it home. Read it when you're ready. Or don't read it at all. Burn it if you want, but he wanted you to have it." Catherine looked down at the envelope in her hands. She could feel pages inside, multiple pages. Whatever Thomas Miller had to say, it wasn't short. "I should go," Catherine said, standing up abruptly. Beverly stood too. They faced each other again. Two women whose lives had been forever changed by one terrible decision made 15 years ago. "Thank you for coming," Beverly said. "I know it probably doesn't mean anything to you, but it means everything to me. To know that you're still here, that you're okay." Catherine wanted to say she wasn't okay, that she'd never been okay since that night, that a piece of her died with Danny and she'd been walking around incomplete ever since. But instead she just nodded and turned to leave. "Catherine," Beverly's voice stopped her at the door. I know this doesn't change anything, and I'm not asking you to forgive us, but I want you to know that I think about your family every single day. I pray for you. I pray that somehow, someday, you find peace. Catherine left without responding. She walked through the main room quickly, not looking at anyone, and pushed through the front door into the cool evening air. The rain she'd smelled earlier was starting to fall, light drops that felt good on her hot face. She sat in her car for a long time, just holding the envelope. Through the windshield, she could see more people arriving for the viewing. They walked in with sympathy cards and sad expressions, there to mourn Thomas Miller and comfort his family. How many of them knew what he'd done? Did they know he'd killed someone? Or did they just know him as a counselor, a friend, a colleague? Catherine set the envelope on the passenger seat and started the car. She needed to go home, needed to process what had just happened. But as she drove through the quiet streets of her town, she couldn't stop thinking about Beverly's face, about the weight of grief she'd seen there. That night, Catherine sat alone in her apartment with the envelope on her coffee table. She stared at it for hours, not opening it. Outside, the rain picked up, drumming against the windows in a steady rhythm. Finally, at almost midnight, she picked it up and carefully tore it open. The letter was 7 pages long, handwritten in that same shaky script. Catherine took a deep breath and started reading. Dear Catherine, it began, I don't have the right to write to you. I don't have the right to ask for a moment of your time or a single thought from your mind. I know that. But I'm dying, and I'm also a coward. And I can't leave this world without at least trying to say the things I should have said 15 years ago. Catherine read on, and with each page something inside her started to shift. Thomas Miller didn't make excuses. He didn't try to justify what he'd done or explain it away. He just told the truth, raw and painful and honest. He wrote about growing up with an alcoholic father, about learning to drink to cope with his own pain, about the night of the accident, the way he'd convinced himself he was fine to drive, the moment he saw Danny's car and knew it was too late. He wrote about prison, about the guilt that ate at him every day, about the other inmates who'd respected him for taking responsibility, who'd asked him for advice, who'd eventually inspired him to want to help others. He wrote about his family, about watching his children suffer for his sins, about his wife standing by him when he didn't deserve it, about every single day feeling like a gift he hadn't earned. And he wrote about Danny, about learning everything he could about the young man he'd killed, about the scholarship fund the Chen family had started in Danny's name, about the reports he'd read of Danny's kindness, his humor, his dreams of becoming a teacher. I took a light from the world, Thomas had written, a bright, beautiful light that should still be shining. I took him from people who loved him. I took away all the good he would have done, all the lives he would have touched. And there's nothing I can do to bring him back. That's what I have to live with. That's my real sentence. The letter ended simply, I don't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that your brother mattered. His life mattered. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Catherine set down the last page and realized her face was wet with tears. She was crying, really crying for the first time in years. Not the angry tears she'd shed before, but something deeper, something that felt like release. She didn't know what to do with what she was feeling. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Maybe not ever, but it was something. A crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. A tiny opening that let in the smallest bit of light. Catherine didn't sleep that night. She read the letter 3 more times, each time finding something new that hit her differently. By morning, she felt exhausted but also strangely awake, like she'd been sleepwalking for years and suddenly opened her eyes. She called in sick to work. She never called in sick. Her principal sounded concerned, asking if she was okay. Catherine said she was fine, just needed a day. But she wasn't fine. Everything felt upside down. For 3 days, she kept the letter secret. She went through her normal routine like a robot. Taught her 4th grade class, graded papers, made small talk with other teachers. But inside, her mind was racing, playing the same questions over and over. What was she supposed to do with this information? What did it change? Did it change anything? On Sunday morning, she made a decision. She needed to tell her family. She couldn't keep carrying this alone. The Chen family had Sunday dinner together every week at her parents' house. It was tradition, something they'd started after Danny died as a way to stay connected. Catherine's stomach was in knots as she drove over, the letter tucked into her purse. Her mother answered the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Patricia Chen had aged dramatically in the last 15 years. She'd been 50 when Danny died, vibrant and full of life. Now at 65, she moved slowly, as if the weight of grief had settled into her bones. "You look tired," her mother said, touching Catherine's cheek. "Are you sleeping okay?" "I'm fine, Mom." Her father was in the living room reading the newspaper. Richard Chen was a man of few words now, though he hadn't always been that way. Before Danny's death, he'd been loud and funny, always telling jokes, always the center of attention. Now he was quiet, sealed off in his own world of pain. Catherine's sister Claire arrived a few minutes later with her husband Mike and their 2 kids. The children ran to hug their grandfather, bringing a brief smile to his face. Kids had that power, Catherine thought. They could break through even the thickest walls. Dinner was the usual. Her mother had made pot roast, Danny's favorite. They always ate his favorite foods on Sundays. It was like keeping him at the table with them. The conversation was light. Claire talked about her kids' school activities. Mike mentioned a project at work. Patricia fussed over everyone's plates, making sure they had enough to eat. Richard said little, just nodded along. Catherine pushed food around her plate, her appetite gone. She could feel the letter in her purse like it was burning a hole through the fabric. She had to say something. Had to tell them, but how? After dessert, after the kids had run off to play in the backyard, Catherine took a deep breath. "I need to tell you all something." The tone of her voice made everyone look up. Claire set down her coffee cup. Her mother's face went pale. Her father's jaw tightened. "What's wrong?" Patricia asked. "Are you sick?" "Is it serious?" "No, I'm not sick. It's..." Catherine pulled out the envelope. "I went somewhere last week. Somewhere I probably shouldn't have gone." "Where?" Claire asked. Catherine's hands were shaking. Thomas Miller's funeral. The silence that followed was deafening. Her father's face turned red. Her mother made a small sound, almost like a whimper. Claire's eyes went wide. "You what?" Richard's voice was low and dangerous. "I don't know why I went. I saw the obituary and I felt like I needed to be there." "Needed to be there?" Her father stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Needed to pay respects to the man who murdered your brother?" "Richard, please," Patricia said weakly. "No." He slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. "This is insane. How could you do this? How could you betray Danny like this?" "I didn't betray Danny," Catherine said, feeling tears starting. "I just needed to see. I needed to understand." "Understand what?" Claire cut in. Her voice was sharp, angry. "There's nothing to understand. He got drunk. He killed our brother. He served some pathetic prison sentence and got to go on living his life while Danny never got that chance. What else is there to understand?" Catherine pulled out the letter. "His wife gave me this. It's from Thomas. He wrote it before he died." "I don't want to hear it," her father said. "I don't care what he had to say, but Dad, no." He was shouting now. "I don't care if he was sorry. I don't care if he spent every day of his miserable life feeling guilty. My son is dead. Your brother is dead. Nothing he wrote in some letter changes that." Patricia was crying now, soft sobs that shook her shoulders. Mike looked uncomfortable, like he wanted to be anywhere but here. Claire was staring at Catherine like she didn't recognize her. "I think you should leave," Richard said. "If you want to side with that monster's family, you're not welcome at this table." "I'm not siding with anyone," Catherine said desperately. "I'm trying to figure out how to live with what happened. I'm trying to find a way to move forward without feeling like I'm drowning in anger every single day." "So we're drowning in anger now?" Claire stood up too. "Is that what you think of us? That we're just bitter people who can't let go?" "That's not what I meant. You know what? Dad's right. You should leave." Claire's voice was cold. "I don't know who you are right now, but you're not my sister." Catherine looked at her mother, hoping for some support, some understanding. But Patricia just kept crying, her face buried in her hands. Catherine grabbed her purse and walked out. She made it to her car before she started sobbing. She'd known they'd be upset, but she hadn't expected this, hadn't expected to be kicked out, to be told she wasn't family anymore. She drove around aimlessly for hours, not wanting to go home to her empty apartment. Eventually, she found herself at the cemetery where Danny was buried. She hadn't been here in months. Used to come every week, but gradually the visits had spread out. Now she came maybe once every few months, usually on his birthday or the anniversary of his death. His gravestone was simple. Daniel Richard Chen, beloved son and brother. The dates of his too short life carved in granite. Catherine sat on the grass next to his grave. It had rained recently and the ground was damp, but she didn't care. "I don't know what to do, Danny," she said out loud. "I went to his funeral. The man who killed you, and his wife gave me this letter and I read it, and now everything feels confused. I thought I knew how to feel. I thought the anger was right, was what I was supposed to feel, but now I don't know anymore." A breeze rustled the leaves of the oak tree nearby. Catherine pulled her knees to her chest. "The family hates me now. Dad said I betrayed you. Maybe I did. Maybe I'm a terrible person for even considering that Thomas Miller was human, that he suffered too. But Danny," her voice broke, "I'm so tired. I'm so tired of being angry. It's like I've been holding on to this burning coal for 15 years and it's burning me up from the inside." She thought about her therapist's words, about drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. That's what she'd been doing, wasn't it? Poisoning herself with hatred while Thomas Miller went on with his life, trying to make amends in his own way. And now he was dead anyway, and she was still here, still carrying the poison. "I miss you so much," she whispered. "Every single day I miss you. You were the good one in our family. You were the one who saw the best in people. What would you want me to do? Would you want me to keep hating? Or would you want me to try to heal?" Of course there was no answer. Just the wind and the distant sound of traffic and the weight of grief that never really went away. Catherine stayed there until the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Danny would have loved this sunset. He was always pointing out beautiful things, making people stop and appreciate them. When she finally drove home, she felt drained but also clearer somehow. Her family might hate her right now, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't keep living the way she had been. Something had to change. That night, she did something she never thought she'd do. She looked up Beverly Miller's phone number. It was listed in the white pages online. Catherine stared at the number for a long time before she picked up her phone. Her finger hovered over the call button. This was crazy. Her family already thought she'd lost her mind. If they found out she was calling Beverly Miller, they'd never speak to her again. But maybe that was okay. Maybe she needed to do this for herself, not for them. She pressed call. The phone rang 3 times before someone picked up. "Hello?" Beverly's voice sounded cautious. "Hi, this is Catherine Chen." There was a long pause. "Catherine, I didn't expect to hear from you." "I read the letter," Catherine said. "Your husband's letter?" "Oh," another pause. "What did you think?" I think I need to talk to you. To your family. I don't know what I'm doing or why, but I need to understand more. She struggled to find the words. "I need to see you as people, not just as the family of the man who killed my brother." Beverly was quiet for so long that Catherine thought she might have hung up. Then she heard a soft sound like Beverly was crying. "We'd like that," Beverly finally said. "We'd like that very much." They made plans to meet at a coffee shop the following Saturday. Neutral territory, Beverly suggested. Somewhere public where they could talk without too much pressure. After Catherine hung up, she felt a strange mix of emotions. Fear, definitely. Guilt that she was going behind her family's back. But also something else. Something that felt almost like hope. She pulled out Thomas's letter and read it one more time. The words that stood out to her now were near the end. "I hope someday your family finds peace. You all deserve that. Danny would want that for you." Maybe he was right. Maybe Danny would want this. Or maybe she was just fooling herself, trying to justify doing something unforgivable. Either way, it was too late to turn back now. The meeting was set. She'd made her choice. Catherine went to bed that night thinking about Saturday. About sitting across from Beverly Miller and her children, looking into the faces of the family she'd spent 15 years hating from a distance. She had no idea what would happen. No idea what she'd say, or what they'd say. But for the first time in a very long time, she felt like she was moving forward instead of standing still. Even if moving forward meant walking away from her own family. Even if it meant being completely alone. Some part of her, a part she barely recognized anymore, whispered that maybe this was what healing looked like. Messy and painful and terrifying, but necessary. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, Danny's face floating in her mind. Not the way he looked in the accident photos the police had shown them, but the way he looked when he laughed, when he was truly happy and alive and full of light. "Help me do the right thing," she whispered into the darkness. Whatever that is. Saturday morning came too fast. Catherine changed her outfit 3 times before settling on jeans and a simple sweater. Nothing too formal, nothing too casual. She didn't know what the dress code was for meeting the family of the person who killed your brother. The coffee shop Beverly had suggested was called The Daily Grind, a local place on the edge of town. Catherine had never been there before. Probably a good thing. No memories attached to it. She arrived 15 minutes early and ordered a coffee she didn't really want, just to have something to do with her hands. She chose a table near the back, away from the window, and waited. They arrived exactly on time. Beverly came in first, followed by a young woman and a young man, her children. Catherine's heart started racing so fast she thought she might pass out. Beverly spotted her and gave a small wave. They walked over, all 3 of them looking as nervous as Catherine felt. "Thank you for meeting us," Beverly said as they sat down. "This is my daughter Melissa and my son Christopher." Catherine looked at them, really looked at them. Melissa was petite, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She had her father's eyes, Catherine noticed with a jolt. Christopher was taller, with Beverly's features. Both of them looked scared. "Hi," Melissa said quietly. We're glad you wanted to meet." Catherine didn't know what to say. "Sorry your father killed my brother. Nice to meet you." Everything felt wrong. Christopher shifted in his seat. "Can I get anyone coffee? I need something to do or I'm going to lose it." Despite everything, Catherine almost smiled. "Sure, black, no sugar." While Christopher went to order, an awkward silence settled over the table. Melissa picked at her fingernails. Beverly folded and refolded her napkin. "I don't know how to do this," Catherine finally admitted. "I don't know what we're supposed to talk about." "Neither do we," Beverly said. "But I'm glad we're trying." Christopher came back with drinks for everyone. He sat down and immediately started shredding his napkin into tiny pieces. "I was 2 when it happened," he said suddenly. "I don't remember my dad before prison. All my memories of him are from visits to the correctional facility. Those awful rooms with the plastic chairs and the guards watching everything. That's what I think of when I think of my father." Catherine hadn't expected that. Hadn't thought about what it would be like to only know your parent as an inmate. "I was 5, Melissa added. "I have a few memories. Dad pushing me on the swing, reading me bedtime stories. But they're fuzzy, you know, like photographs that have been in the sun too long. And I don't know if they're real memories or just things Mom told me about that I turned into memories." "He loved you both so much," Beverly said softly. "That never changed." "I know." Melissa's eyes filled with tears. "But it was hard growing up, being the kids whose dad killed someone. Do you know what that's like? Having people whisper when you walk by? Having parents pull their kids away from you at the playground like you're contaminated?" Catherine felt something twist in her chest. She'd never thought about it from that angle. In her mind, the Miller family had been the enemy. She'd never considered that they were suffering too. "We got hate mail," Christopher said, "for years. People writing to tell us we were evil, that bad blood runs in families, that we'd probably end up killing someone too." He looked directly at Catherine for the first time. "I know your brother didn't deserve what happened to him, but we didn't deserve what happened to us either. We were just kids." "You're right," Catherine heard herself say. "You were just kids. You didn't do anything wrong." Melissa started crying openly now. "I've wanted to say I'm sorry to your family for my whole life. I know it wasn't my fault, but I'm still his daughter. His blood is in me, and I'm so sorry for what he did. For what he took from you." Catherine reached across the table and took Melissa's hand. She didn't plan it, her body just moved on its own. "You don't have to apologize for him. You're not responsible for his choices." They sat like that for a moment, Catherine holding the hand of Thomas Miller's daughter, while Beverly cried quietly and Christopher looked away, blinking hard. "Can I ask you about your brother?" Melissa said eventually. "About Danny? We only know him as a victim, as the person our father killed. But he was more than that, wasn't he?" Catherine felt her throat tighten. He was so much more than that. And then she started talking. She told them about Danny's terrible jokes that made everyone groan, about how he volunteered at the animal shelter every weekend, about his dream of becoming a teacher, how he wanted to work with special needs kids because he said they were the ones who needed the most patience and love. She told them about the time Danny spent his entire paycheck buying coats for homeless people in the middle of winter, about how he'd call their mom every single day just to check in, about his laugh, which was too loud and snorting and absolutely perfect. "He sounds amazing," Christopher said. "He sounds like someone I wish I could have known." "He was," Catherine said. "He really was." Beverly pulled something from her purse. A photo. Thomas kept this. He found it in a newspaper article about Danny and he carried it with him, in prison, after prison, always. He said he needed to remember that Danny was a real person, that he wasn't just a mistake. He was a human being with people who loved him. The photo showed Danny at his college graduation, grinning with his diploma held high. Catherine remembered that day. They'd all been so proud. "Can I tell you something?" Beverly asked. "And please know I'm not trying to make excuses or minimize what Thomas did, but I want you to understand who he was, too." Catherine nodded. Thomas grew up in a terrible home. His father was an alcoholic who beat him regularly. His mother left when he was 12. He raised himself and his younger sister, basically. He started drinking young to cope with the pain. By the time I met him in college, he seemed okay. Functional. I didn't realize how much he was struggling. "That doesn't excuse what he did," Christopher said firmly. "Dad always said that. He'd say, 'I had reasons but not excuses. I made a choice and someone died because of it.'" Beverly nodded. "He got sober in prison, went to every AA meeting they offered, got therapy, really did the work. When he got out, he didn't drink again, not once. He dedicated his life to helping other people struggling with addiction." "He saved my life," a voice said from behind them. They all turned. A man in his 30s stood there looking uncomfortable but determined. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I saw you all sitting here and I recognized Mrs. Miller. I wanted to say that Thomas Miller saved my life. I was an alcoholic. Nearly killed someone driving drunk just like he did. He counseled me, met with me 3 times a week for 2 years, talked me off the ledge more times than I can count. I've been sober for 6 years now because of him." The man looked at Catherine. "I don't know who you are, but if you're family of the person he hurt, I want you to know that he spent every day trying to make up for it. He couldn't bring your loved one back, but he stopped other people from doing what he did. That has to count for something." He left before anyone could respond. Catherine sat there stunned. She'd imagined Thomas Miller as a monster for so long. But monsters don't dedicate their lives to helping others. Monsters don't carry photos of their victims to remember their humanity. "There were others," Beverly said quietly. "Dozens of people whose lives he touched. People who wrote to us after he died, sharing how he helped them. None of it brings Danny back. We know that. But Thomas didn't waste his second chance. He used it to do good." "Why are you telling me this?" Catherine asked. "Because I want you to know that your brother's death wasn't meaningless," Beverly said. "What happened was terrible and wrong, and never should have happened. But in a twisted way, Danny's death led to my husband changing, and that change led to him helping so many others. I know that's not comfort. I know it doesn't balance the scales. But maybe something good came from something horrible." Catherine thought about that, about chain reactions, about how one moment in time can ripple out in ways nobody expects. Danny died and Thomas went to prison, and in prison he got sober, and after prison he helped others, and some of those others went on to have families and lives they wouldn't have had without him. It didn't make Danny's death okay. Nothing could ever make it okay. But maybe it made it slightly less senseless. I've been so angry for so long, Catherine said. At your father. At the universe. At God. At myself for not being able to save Danny. The anger has been eating me alive. I understand, Beverly said. I've been angry too. At Thomas for what he did to our family. At the people who judged us. At myself for not seeing how bad his drinking was. Anger is easier than grief sometimes. What made you stop being angry? Catherine asked. Beverly smiled sadly. Who says I stopped? Some days I'm still furious, but I learned that I could be angry and still choose to move forward. The anger doesn't have to be the only thing I feel. Melissa leaned forward. Can I ask you something? And please say no if it's too much, but would you ever consider meeting with some of the people my dad helped? Hearing their stories? Catherine's first instinct was to say no. But then she thought about the man who'd just approached them. About the genuine gratitude in his voice. About lives saved and families kept intact because Thomas Miller had dedicated himself to prevention. Maybe, she said. Not now, but maybe someday. They talked for 2 more hours. About everything and nothing. About grief and guilt and the impossibility of moving forward while honoring the past. About forgiveness and whether it was even possible or necessary. As they were getting ready to leave, Christopher pulled out his phone. Can I show you something? My dad made me promise to show this to you if I ever got the chance. He pulled up a video. It showed Thomas Miller, obviously sick, sitting in what looked like a hospital room. He was thin and tired, but his eyes were clear. Catherine Chen, Thomas's voice said from the phone. If you're watching this, it means my family actually had the courage to reach out to you, and you had the courage to listen. I want to say thank you for that. I don't deserve your time or your attention. I don't deserve anything from you. I killed your brother. There's no softening that or explaining it away. I was drunk. I drove, he died. That's on me. That's my burden to carry forever. But I want you to know that I thought about him every single day. I learned everything I could about him. I know he wanted to be a teacher. I know he volunteered with animals. I know he made everyone laugh. I know the world is darker without him in it. I can't bring him back. God, I wish I could. But I've tried to honor his memory by making sure other families don't go through what yours did. I've tried to turn the worst thing I ever did into something that prevents others from doing the same. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know that your brother mattered. His life had value, and I'm sorry. I'm so desperately sorry for taking him from this world and from everyone who loved him. The video ended. Catherine realized she was crying again. Thank you for showing me that, she said. They exchanged phone numbers before leaving. Catherine wasn't sure what would come next. She didn't know if they'd meet again or if this was a one-time thing. But something had shifted. Something had changed. She drove home in a daze, her mind replaying everything that had been said. When she got to her apartment, she found a message on her phone from her mother. Catherine, it's Mom. Your father is still very angry, but I need to talk to you. Can you come over? Just you and me? Catherine sat in her mother's kitchen 2 days later, watching Patricia Chen pour tea with shaking hands. Her father was at work, which was probably why her mother had suggested this time. They both knew Richard would never allow this conversation if he were home. You met them, Patricia said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Beverly Miller and her children. Catherine nodded, waiting for her mother's anger, but Patricia just sighed and sat down heavily. Tell me about it, she said. Tell me what happened. So Catherine did. She told her mother everything. About the funeral, the letter, the coffee shop meeting. About Melissa and Christopher and what their lives had been like. About Thomas's work helping others. About the man who approached them to say his life had been saved. Patricia listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. When Catherine finished, her mother was quiet for a long time. I've been dreaming about Danny, Patricia finally said. Every night for the past week. In the dreams, he's trying to tell me something, but I can't hear him. He keeps pointing at something, getting more and more frustrated that I don't understand. Mom, I think I know what he was trying to say. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. He was trying to tell me to let go, to stop living in the past, to forgive. Catherine reached across the table and took her mother's hand. I'm so tired, Catherine, Patricia whispered. I'm so tired of being angry. It's like carrying a boulder everywhere I go. I thought the anger was honoring Danny. But now I wonder if it's just been slowly killing me instead. What about Dad? And Claire? Patricia shook her head. Your father may never be ready. Claire neither. They're not where we are. And that's okay. Everyone heals differently. Everyone grieves differently. So what do? I want to meet her, Patricia said. Beverly, I want to look her in the eyes and see for myself what you saw. Catherine set up the meeting for the following week. It was just her mother and Beverly at first, meeting at the same coffee shop. Catherine stayed nearby but gave them space, sitting at a different table with a book she couldn't focus on. She watched them talk for over an hour. Watched her mother cry. Watched Beverly cry. Watched them reach across the table and hold hands. Two women bound together by tragedy. Both mothers who'd lost pieces of their souls. When they finished, Patricia came over to Catherine with red, swollen eyes. She's a good person, Patricia said. That makes it harder somehow. It would be easier if she was awful. But she's just a person who's been through hell, same as us. Over the next few months, something remarkable began to happen. Patricia and Beverly started meeting regularly. Coffee once a week, then twice. They talked about their children, their grief, their struggles. They found comfort in each other in a way that surprised everyone, especially themselves. The news spread through their small town. At first, people were shocked, then judgmental. How could Patricia Chen befriend the wife of her son's killer? It was unnatural. It was wrong. It was a betrayal. Catherine lost friends over it. People at work whispered. Her principal called her in to ask if everything was okay at home. Even strangers felt entitled to comment, stopping her at the grocery store to tell her she was making a mistake. Her father and sister still refused to speak to her. Family holidays came and went without invitations. Catherine spent Thanksgiving alone in her apartment, eating takeout and wondering if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. Then a local journalist heard the story and wanted to write about it. Catherine's first instinct was to say no. The last thing they needed was more attention. But Beverly thought it might help others, so Catherine agreed. The article ran in the local paper first, then got picked up by a regional magazine, then went national. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion about the Chen Miller situation. The story went viral on social media, with thousands of people weighing in. Some people called Catherine a saint. Others called her a traitor. Some said she was brave. Others said she was weak. The comment sections were brutal, filled with people who'd never experienced what she had but felt qualified to judge her choices. Catherine's inbox flooded with messages. Some were supportive. Others were vicious. But some were from people sharing their own stories of forgiveness, of choosing to move forward after unimaginable pain. Those messages kept her going. One email stood out. It was from a woman named Ruth whose daughter had been killed by a drunk driver 10 years earlier. I spent 8 years drowning in hatred, Ruth wrote. It was destroying my marriage, my relationship with my other children, my health. Then I read about restorative justice and decided to meet with the man who killed my daughter. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it saved my life. Not because he deserved my forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. Thank you for sharing your story. You're helping more people than you know. Catherine read that email over and over. She printed it out and kept it on her refrigerator for the hard days. The publicity brought unexpected opportunities. Catherine and Beverly were invited to speak at a conference on restorative justice. Then another. Soon they were traveling around the region, sharing their story with victims' families, addiction counselors, prisoners, anyone who would listen. They didn't talk about forgiveness as if it were simple or easy or always the right choice. They talked about it as one possible path forward. They talked about how grief and healing aren't linear, how you can forgive someone and still be angry, how peace doesn't mean forgetting. Melissa and Christopher sometimes joined them. They talked about growing up in the shadow of their father's crime, about the power of redemption, about breaking cycles of pain. One day, 6 months after the article had run, Catherine came home to find her sister Claire waiting outside her apartment. "Can we talk?" Claire asked. They sat in Catherine's living room the first time Claire had been there in months.